Have you ever seen those fabulous trees at the Christmas store and thought to yourself, there is no way I can achieve that at home? Well, of course you can. It just takes the desire, the right decorations, which don't have to be expensive, and the right tips and techniques. If you clicked on this video, then you probably have the first one, and I can help you with the last two. And don't worry, you don't have to be a designer. I'm certainly not. I'm just crazy about Christmas. But before we get into today's video, for those of you that are new to my channel, hi, my name is Catherine, and I absolutely love decorating for the holidays. I also love fashion and beauty. So if you happen to love any, or maybe even all of those topics, then I hope you'll consider subscribing. Also, let's do a quick roll call. I find it so fascinating to know where people are watching my videos from. So go ahead and jump down into the comments below and let me know where you live. I live in Oklahoma in the United States. In today's video, we're going to be decorating my 12-foot Christmas tree in, well, this theme. But all these techniques really will scale up or down based on your tree and work with any color scheme. And this is a little bit new of a tree for me. I've actually upgraded a few of the items, including the ribbon, a few of the picks, and, well, the tree itself. So I did purchase this tree at the end of season last year from Balsam Hill, so it's going to be my first time actually decorating it this year. But now let's go ahead and rewind 30 hours and get started on the tree. So the first step is an obvious one, but it is a very important one, and that is to actually set up the tree. And there's two things that you can do here to really make sure your tree looks as professional as possible. The first is fluffing, and the second is lighting. So what I'm going to do to set up my tree is I'm going to basically work it from the bottom up, and I'm going to take each row, one row at a time, and I'm going to fluff, making sure that I touch every single branch tip and really splay those tips out as much as possible. That's going to ensure maximum fullness of the tree. And let me tell you, this tree is so bougie, it actually came with its own pairs of gloves. But the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to actually run lights as I go along. So a good general rule of thumb with a tree is if it's 9 feet or under, you want to have about 100 lights for every foot of tree. So a 7-foot tree, 700 lights, 9-foot tree, 900 lights. As you get bigger though, you actually want to go up to about 150 to maybe even 200 lights per foot. So because my tree is a 12-foot tree, I'm going to make sure that I have at least 1,800 lights on it. The tree that I have is pre-lit and it comes with 1,600 lights already built into it, which is great. But I'm actually going to add 4 additional strands of my own. And what they are these special lights that actually have a twinkle function. So what I'm going to do as I'm fluffing row by row is I'm going to run these lights a little bit on the inside of the tree, and then I'll go to the next row and run the lights on the inside of that layer and work my way up. And when you take a step back and look at the tree, the great thing about it is you won't necessarily see a big flashing, blinking tree. It'll just look like the tree is shimmering from within. And I will go ahead and link to my favorite twinkling light set down in the description box below. I use these lights on pretty much all of my trees except my silver tinsel one. Well, you can probably tell that by the change in light behind me that the sun has shifted quite a bit since we first started. And that's because it did take me a couple of hours to put the tree together and to get it fluffed and put the lights on. Couple reasons for that. One is because I'm filming, and so it always takes me a little bit longer to do everything when I'm filming. And the other is this is a new tree, so I'm trying to figure out the right way to fluff and the right spacing for the lights. But you do want to be sure to take your time and do a really good job on this step. I also took a quick break to walk my dog and go down and get the mail, and look what had arrived in the mailbox, the new Balsam Hill catalog. So I'll have to take a look at this a little later and see what other kind of trouble I can get myself into. So let's move on now to the second step, which is creating a fabulous tree topper. And there's a few elements that I traditionally use when it comes to creating a fabulous tree topper. The first is I like to somehow incorporate light into my tree topper. Sometimes I'll just make sure that I keep extra of the twinkle lights so I can wrap those into the tree topper and do something like that. But I have a couple other techniques that I like to apply, and I'm going to do that here today. So one is I actually like to add a spotlight into the tops of trees sometimes, especially in a space like this where the space actually goes up. There's a lot of height and it can get a little dark up there. So I think adding a spotlight is a great way to bring some light to the top, and it shines up into basically the ceiling. I'll link to how I created this, but basically it's just a light socket from one of those heat lamps with an LED bulb that won't get hot. And then the other item is called an umbrella light, and the various stems on it are flexible so you can make it into the shape that you want. And I'm going to add this up at the top as well. And what I'm going to do with both of these is I'm going to actually run the cord of them down the trunk of the tree, and I'm going to run an extension cord from the bottom up and meet somewhere in the middle so I can plug them in. The next part of the tree topper is going to be the sprays that are going to come up out of the top of the tree topper, kind of making it look like it's almost an explosion of fireworks. And these are going to go well with that umbrella light. So typically there's a few things to keep in mind when you're thinking about what to incorporate into the top of your tree topper. You want to think about the colors that you use, the textures, the heights, and the variety of items that you use. So what I'm going to be using are basically 4 different stems, and you'll see that they consist of a variety of all of those things I just discussed. But most importantly, they take all the colors from the tree and pull it into the tree topper. And the last part of the tree topper are the bows, which I'm going to use for the base of the tree topper and form in a ring around it. For a 9 or 12-foot tree, I typically recommend about 4 bows like this. If you have smaller than a 9-foot tree, you can probably get by with about 3. These are bows that I made myself, and I actually have a video that I just filmed showing one of the 4 bows and how to make it. So if you want to know how to make something like this, check the description box and I'll have that link. And then what I'm going to use to attach all of this to the tree are pipe cleaners. These are my absolute favorite material to use when it comes to attaching things to the tree, such as tree toppers, because they come in a variety of colors, they're easy to work with, and they're inexpensive. All right, we're now on to step 3 and day 2 of decorating. By the way, it's not that day 1 actually takes a full day, it's just that this is the natural place that I always like to break it up when I'm working on my 12-foot tree. But step 3 is going to be adding all of the filler to the tree. So this is going to be your things like ribbons, bows, sprays, picks, those kinds of things. And for this tree, this year I have upgraded a few of the items that I'm using on the tree. One of them being the ribbons that I'm using. So those are the same ribbons that I used in the bows, but I'm also going to be adding them throughout the tree. And then I've also gotten a few new poinsettias to add to the existing sprays that I've used in the past. And so what I've done is a technique that I have used on the past, but not quite as much on this tree, which is to create clusters, which is taking a grouping of sprays and picks and things and putting them together. And a good rule of thumb for this is to have about 1 cluster per every foot of tree that you have. What I actually created were 2 different sizes in the clusters, and each cluster is a little bit different from the other because I have a few different poinsettias, picks, etc. that I incorporate throughout. I'll go ahead and insert a clip of me making a couple of these clusters just so you can see how easy it is to do. Basically, you just need to figure out what materials you want to use. Those materials will typically consist of some kind of bigger items such as the poinsettias. You can have 1 or 2, then a few different sprays, and then maybe a couple of additional smaller embellishments such as these monkey pods that I'm using. You line all of the spines up, and then you can use either one of the spines to actually wrap around the cluster to keep it together, or you can go back to using something like pipe cleaners or floral wire. Then when it's time to place the clusters in the tree, you're going to want to do them so that the cluster is kind of coming down towards the ground, because that mimics more the natural way that a tree actually looks when you see it out in nature. And for these, I am going to place them in a little bit of a zigzag pattern. So I'll start in one spot and then place it in the tree, and to place it, I'm going to use the greenery of the tree to just tie it kind of in place around that spine. Then for the next one, I'm going to go down slightly and place that one. For the next one, I'll go up again, but not at exactly the same height as the first one I placed. And I'll do this working my way around the tree. And then for my ribbons, I'm going to create some simple single loop bows that I place with the cluster and then cut off about, probably 3 feet of ribbon and just weave that in and out of the tree in a little bit of a zigzag pattern as well. And just to give you an idea how much ribbon I'm using, I am using 4 rolls each of 4 different ribbons, and each roll is about 10 yards. Obviously, this could scale to the size of your tree. I'm going to save 1 roll each for at the very end to fill in any gaps that I may find. I'm also going along with all of the extra picks and stems that I have from the materials that I was using in the clusters, and I'm just adding these into various spots. I'm kind of creating almost informal clusters in some cases. One of the places that I'm creating these is spots where the ribbon pushes into the tree, and then I'm also just finding some bare spots and creating these there. The difference between these clusters and the original clusters is the original clusters are things that I'll actually keep grouped together and store like that. These I'm just kind of creating ad hoc, so I'll store them as the individual pieces and then kind of recreate it as I need to each year. That's really one of my favorite steps. I feel like the tree really just starts to come together and you start to get a sense for how it's going to look with that step. But now we're moving on to step 4, which is putting on ornaments. But we've got to start in a very particular place, and that is to place some of the bigger items. So I have a few different things. I have a few of these large deer, which I'm going to actually nestle into the tree in a few strategic places. And then I have a lot of balls, which are kind of more filler balls, meaning that they're more meant to fill large spaces or gaps than just to necessarily look pretty, which doesn't mean that they don't. But you can see I've got a variety of sizes. I have, other sizes as well. I do find that these really large sizes can be hard to find at your traditional readily available stores like Hobby Lobby or at home. They're getting better, but typically I have to find these at more specialty Christmas shops. But what I'm doing with these large balls is I'm actually going to push them inside the tree so that when you look at the tree, you can't really see through. Your eye gets stopped at the balls. And especially for the ones that are shiny, it will also help reflect light and bounce it back out. For these large items, a lot of times I do just nestle, meaning I don't put a hanger on them. Typically, you don't really need to. You just push them in and the branches will keep them in place. Occasionally on some of the really large ones where maybe the branches want to push them back out, I will use one of my handy dandy pipe cleaners to tie it to a branch to keep it where it's at. And when we're done with that step, we'll move on to more balls. And these are still what I consider filler balls, but they start to become maybe a little bit more decorative. So they're still going to be, I would say, kind of a medium small size, and oftentimes they're going to be something that I kind of nestle, but instead of pushing them as far into the tree, these are going to sit a little further out. And they're starting to be a little bit more interesting from a texture standpoint. So while they're repetitive, I have a lot of them, they do start to add a little bit more flair to the tree. And I have a tendency to work these by type. So if I have 12 of one type, I'll place all 12 around the tree before moving on to the next one. That's to ensure that I just maintain a reasonable spacing throughout the tree. We have officially reached that point in the video where I am covered in glitter. But we have moved away from the balls for a little bit, and we're moving on now to non-balls that are similar in that they're a little bit larger, or I have a lot of them, they're just not balls. And so similarly, I'm going to work these by going one type at a time and placing them on the tree before I move on to the next type. For these, I may need to hang them. And when that's the case, my preference is to use a built-in hanger if it has it. Otherwise, I will add an ornament hook. But in either case, I will hang them as close to the branch from which it's hung as possible, just to make it look as integrated as possible. We're now on to the last few ornaments, and that is hanging the specialty ornaments. So these are things that are either one of a kind, maybe a little bit more expensive, maybe have special meaning attached, and therefore you want to put them in some of the most prominent places on the tree. And because we've roughly been working our way kind of inside out of the tree, that means we still have some really good spots on the ends of branches where we can showcase these ornaments. Once again, my preference is to use the built-in hangers where possible, otherwise I will add ornament hooks. And just as a little tip, when you are hanging something using the built-in hanger, one thing that you can do is rather than slip the loop over the branch, is actually just wrap the loop around the branch several times until the ornament's hanging right up underneath that branch. All right, we are on the home stretch now. So we've got all the ornaments on the tree. So the last step for the tree itself is to kind of take a step back and survey how everything's looking and make any adjustments. And so this is where I'm going to come back and fill in any gaps with my ribbon. And I've basically got 3 different ways I'm going to do that. One is I've created these simple single loop bows with my double ribbon and then left a long tail so I can tuck this in to different spots and then kind of weave the tail in and out. Then I have just the double ribbon cut in some lengths that I can just weave in and out with no loop. And then I do have a few just the single loops of the double ribbon that I can just tuck in and it won't have a tail. So I'm going to go around the tree and add these where I think it's needed, and then we'll come back for the very last step, which is decorating the underneath of the tree. We're now down to the final step, which is to decorate under the tree. And to me, this is just as important as decorating the tree itself. So I've got a few things that I'm going to set around the tree. I also have some empty boxes that I've wrapped in years past that I'll also go ahead and put under the tree, and this just gives it a nice finished look. And here is the finished tree. And now you know how you can create your very own fabulous designer tree. And I'm really thrilled with how this tree came out. Of course, I've done most of this tree in years past, but I did have a few new elements that I incorporated into it this year, including the Christmas tree itself, which I will say Balsam Hill trees are definitely an investment, but I am really pleased with how it looks and how it performs, so I'm excited to have this tree for many, many years to come. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. If so, please be sure to give me a thumbs up. It is such a great way to help me out on my channel. Also, if you're still here, that probably means you're enjoying my content. So if you're not already subscribed, go ahead and do that. You won't want to miss out on my upcoming Christmas content, including my annual Christmas home decor tour, where I will feature this tree along with all the other fabulous trees and decorations in my house. I'll also go ahead and link to a Christmas tree decorating playlist that has a bunch of other styles of trees that I do with even more tips and techniques, because you can't do every technique all on the same tree. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I'm off to go treat my neighbor's horses and donkey, and until next time, bye.